Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you Giulio Magalhães from the local chapter of the Sierra Club, the Loma Prieta chapter. Their offices are just maybe a mile and a half away from here on Bayshore Road. We have also a couple of other people from the Sierra Club here, Melissa Hippert, the director of the local chapter, and Kirsten O'Hare also from the local chapter. Giulio is going to talk to us about their global warming program and how they try to build up a volunteer corps of people to help with local action, and also about their program which trains people how to train other people how to take local action and individual action to become more effective. Giulio has a background as an atmospheric scientist, I believe, and he's from NASA originally, and is now with the Sierra Club for a couple of years. Welcome, Giulio.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Robert. It's really a pleasure to be able to come here and talk to you about what you can do regarding global warming. This mic on? OK, great. So what I'd like to do is really talk to you about local action to address global warming. I think as we look at the range of responses to global warming and the climate challenge, the clean energy challenge, I think it's really safe to say that the local level action is really one of the stellar examples of where there's been quite a bit of progress. And so what I'd like to do is to talk to you about our chapter's campaign, our global warming, our climate action campaign, as a case study in local action. And we have quite a comprehensive campaign, so we can touch on various ways in which local action on global warming can be taken. Our chapter, the Loma Prieta chapter, includes Santa Clara, San Mateo, and San Benito counties. We're one of the largest Sierra Club chapters. As you may know, the National Sierra Club is divided into a series of chapters. Ours is one of the original chapters and also one of the largest. Our chapter has made addressing global warming its #1 priority through local action, as opposed to, say, working at the state level or the federal level. We've really focused on reducing global warming emissions from the Silicon Valley region. And so what I'd like to do today is talk to you a little bit about why it's important to take local action. I'll give you a very, very brief introduction to the science. I'm sure you've heard lots of talks on the science of climate change, so my introduction will be very, very brief. And then I'd like to talk about some of the work we've been doing in the various aspects of our campaign. So as Robert indicated, I started my journey to this position actually doing atmospheric science, studying the climates of other planets. I used to study Mars and Jupiter and the climates there. And back around the turn of the millennium, I realized that the science was very solid. Certainly, the atmospheric physics is the same, whether you're talking about Mars, Jupiter, or the Earth. And I had been keeping up with the research, and I was becoming very concerned that we weren't taking action on global warming. So through a series of steps, I left NASA Ames Research Center, one of your partners, actually, and moved on to a series of steps to this position with the Loma Prieta chapter. Our chapter is unique in that it is one of the few, and as far as I know, the only chapter that actually has a staff person dedicated to global warming activity. So as I like to say, this is our family portrait here on the left. Being from NASA, of course, I do have to take you on a short journey into space. So this is our family. This is really our family portrait. Everything we consider near and dear to us is in that picture, whether it's our loved ones, whether it's the wonderful redwood trees that we enjoy hiking in, whether it's the bacteria that makes beer possible. It's just every single thing that we consider near and dear is in that picture. And having studied Mars and Jupiter, I can really testify directly that we really live on a very, very unique place. This is the only planet in the solar system that has liquid water at its surface. In fact, one might call our planet the water planet. And it's the only planet that has complex life forms. And in fact, has a diversity of life forms. And as far as we know, is actually the only planet that has any types of life forms, at least in our solar system. So there are very unique conditions that are responsible for that, to enable life and liquid water to exist. And those unique conditions are ultimately made possible by our atmosphere, the composition of the air that we breathe. And so here on the right is a figure that shows percentage-wise, every breath of air we take, what are the ingredients in that air? And of course, most of the molecules we breathe in are nitrogen, and I don't think that's a surprise. About 21% is oxygen, which of course is important for us as we metabolize and try to produce energy to power ourselves as we go about our daily lives. But the ingredient I want to focus on is carbon dioxide, which, although a relatively minor ingredient, 0.037%, is actually extremely important in regulating this thermal balance that allows life and the conditions on the surface of the Earth to sustain liquid water and life forms. Now, carbon dioxide is actually, of all those molecules, is the only one that has a significant impact on this thermal balance. And I generated this slide about 2 years ago. And so the percentage there is 0.037% for the carbon dioxide concentration. If I had generated this slide yesterday, that percentage would be 0.038%. In other words, it's a very easy observation to see the rising concentrations of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. And our ability to measure the composition of the atmosphere is so accurate that we can also see that the oxygen levels are dropping. Just as the carbon dioxide levels are rising, we can see the oxygen levels dropping. And that, of course, is because combustion consumes oxygen, combines it with a fossil fuel such as coal, oil, or natural gas, and releases carbon dioxide. And we can see the ratios going up and down exactly as you'd expect from combustion. So this is a chart which attempts to show the rising concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So this is the year 1000 out to today, and then out to 2100. And this axis here shows the concentration of carbon dioxide in parts per million. So that would be 0.038% using percentages. And so here, for much of the time prior to the Industrial Revolution, the concentration of carbon dioxide was about 275 parts per million. Then, with the start of the Industrial Revolution, this level has been rising. Today, it's at 385 parts per million, I think it is today. And these are various projections of what the concentration will be by the year 2100. So these different scenarios represent different assumptions about where we're going to get our energy from. In other words, what percentage comes from fossil fuels, how much population growth there will be, and how much economic growth there will be. And an important point to remember is that carbon dioxide is not a traditional air pollutant, in the sense that a traditional air pollutant such as ozone, which is high today because of the Spare the Air Day, in a few days or in a few hours, it'll be washed out of the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide, on the other hand, once we put it into the atmosphere, is there for hundreds of years. So what we see here in this rising concentration of carbon dioxide is the accumulated amount since the start of the Industrial Revolution divided by approximately 2, because half of it actually ends up dissolving in the oceans. So what I want to make clear to you is that we're really in a unique moment in history right now. We're right about here, and we have a choice now. If we take decisive action, even if we do everything right, the best we can do in terms of the concentration of carbon dioxide is to get up to about 550, limit the rise to about 550 parts per million. In contrast, if we don't take decisive action now and we do everything wrong, we could end up at extremely high concentrations, which there's no doubt that would have a major impact on climate, rising temperatures, et cetera. So really, we face a very unique challenge right now. If we take decisive action, we can end up on this curve rather than rising to 1,000 parts per million. So we really need rapid, decisive action now to reduce our carbon dioxide emissions as well as other greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with other human activities. So what I'd like to just point out is that really greenhouse gas emissions are intricately linked with basic areas of human activity. In other words, our energy use, because 85% of our energy comes from fossil fuel burning, whether we're talking about the United States as a whole or the world as a whole. Waste disposal, there's a former landfill there's a landfill right next to here. It's no longer active. And in that landfill, the waste that's there is, through the action of anaerobic bacteria, is producing methane, which goes out into the atmosphere. Methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas. On a per molecule basis, it's more powerful than carbon dioxide, even though carbon dioxide is the main human-generated greenhouse gas. And then agriculture produces a range of greenhouse gases associated with the running of tractors. Of course, that would be energy use, with fertilizers producing nitrogen dioxide, which is another potent greenhouse gas. So we all have a role to play here because we're all ultimately consuming energy, consuming food, and disposing of waste. And we all have a role, whether it's individuals, institutions at the local level, businesses, local government, state, and federal activity is all important in addressing climate change. So what I'd like to do is just highlight where our local greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. So this is a chart that shows actually the emissions inventory represented in terms of equivalent CO2 amounts. So this would include other molecules like methane, except expressed as equivalent CO2. And this is actually an emission inventory for the city of San Mateo. But this is pretty typical for a city in our region, the Bay Area. And so you can see clearly the largest component of our greenhouse gas emissions comes from the transportation sector. The second largest component comes from a combination of natural gas and electricity, which is associated with the built environment. Essentially, all of that is being consumed in the built environment, whether it's private residences, businesses, et cetera. And then municipal waste, for example, dumps, accounts for about, municipal activity, local government activity produces about 2% of the total carbon footprint of San Mateo and our region generally. And then municipal waste disposal consists of about 3%. So why does this matter? Well, it turns out a lot of these emissions are controlled by local government activity and, of course, by individuals. So here we're talking about the built environment. Traditionally, local governments have had control over building ordinances, and therefore they could potentially enact powerful green building ordinances, which would reduce the greenhouse gas emissions associated with energy use in buildings and other activities in buildings. Cities traditionally regulate development in a community. They regulate transportation in some important regards. And so they have some control over vehicle miles traveled. And then, of course, so waste disposal. All cities have a mandate to reduce the amount of waste going into the local landfill, and therefore recycling programs and the like can have an important impact on that. So we really, at the local level, there's quite a bit of potential for impacting the amount of greenhouse gas emissions locally. So our chapter, recognizing the important opportunity to address global warming emissions at the local level, has a very active climate action campaign. As I said earlier, our chapter's executive committee has made this its #1 priority, and we've had quite a bit of success in engaging a large number of volunteers in our campaign. So our campaign consists of essentially 4 initiatives. We have an education and outreach initiative, and I'll say more about these as we go through. We have an initiative involving local government action, working to have local governments control the carbon footprint of not only the local government operations, but the community as a whole. That's called our Cool Cities campaign, which also happens to be a National Sierra Club campaign. Realizing that it's important to have a comprehensive campaign in order to really reduce the carbon footprint of our community as a whole, we've started a new program called Climate Action Teams, designed to create individual and institutional action to reduce global warming emissions. And finally, perhaps the longest standing component of our chapter's climate action campaign, we have an initiative that tries to reduce local barriers to solar power and has had some significant impact in that regard. So the first initiative is just education and outreach, and as you might expect, that includes presentations, mainly by me. Given my background, I can talk about the science of climate change. I can also talk about our campaign effectively and really try to convey what solutions might be possible as far as addressing global warming. We have a really active, especially now that we have our climate action campaign, we have a very active set of tablings at events. This is just our newest display highlighting our campaign. We have, so far this year, tabled at, I believe it's now 18 events, some of those during Earth Week, but throughout the year. And this is an area where volunteers have really enjoyed being engaged because they can directly talk to the community, tell them about their passion regarding global warming, and give them useful information that might help them change their behaviors and engage them in our campaign. And then actually one of the first things I did when I started in my position about 2 years ago was to really upgrade our website to facilitate action on a large scale by introducing an online database, which we call our global warming database, and just improving in general our website. And we've had so much interest in our global warming website team that they've actually moved ahead and even helped the chapter as a whole improve its website to facilitate the interaction with members and to really effectively convey what we do. To illustrate the success we've had in terms of engaging individuals, our global warming database, which is an opt-in database, which we started beginning of last year, went from 0 to 2,400 people in less than 18 months. And that just shows, I think, dramatically the real thirst that people have to try to do something about global warming besides just changing a light bulb, as I like to say. Oops. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is talk about our local government action component, which is our Cool Cities campaign. And a derivative of that Cool Cities campaign is what we call our Cool Counties campaign. And both of these campaigns are designed to form teams of individuals, teams of residents in each city or in each county, and have those teams work with their local government leaders to reduce the carbon footprint of the community as a whole, as well as from the local government operations. So this is a National Sierra Club campaign. Our chapter has really taken a cutting edge role in that. And as far as I know of the chapters in the Bay Area, and we are the only chapter that actually has an extremely active Cool Cities campaign. So the campaign, like I said, consists of forming teams of residents in each city, having those teams develop relationships with the staff and the local government leaders at their cities and counties. And the first milestone of the campaign is to get the cities to sign on to what's called the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement, or in the case of counties, it would be the Cool Counties Declaration. And those instruments basically commit the city or county to reducing the carbon footprint of the community as a whole, and also put the city and county on record as indicating that they believe the global warming is an important issue that needs to be addressed, and that actions needed at all levels, including at the city and county levels. The second step, which our teams are working for, is to have the cities inventory the emissions of greenhouse gases throughout the community as well as in the local government operations, and then to set an emission reduction target, hopefully an aggressive one that's at least as aggressive as our state targets, which Governor Schwarzenegger and the legislature formalized through the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006. Then our teams try to have cities and counties develop a plan for achieving those targets from the baseline emissions, and then implementing that plan and actually reducing emissions. So just to give you a status report on our own campaign, on the left here is a map showing how many cities have Cool Cities teams. So our campaign started in November of 2006. We have 19 Cool Cities teams Remember that our chapter includes Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, does not include San Francisco or the East Bay. So we actually have a large fraction of the cities in our region have Cool Cities teams now. They've engaged about 100 active volunteers. And here on the right, this is a map showing which cities have signed the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement and which counties have signed the Cool Counties Declaration. And you can see that 23 cities have signed the Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement, and both counties, San Mateo County and Santa Clara County, have declared that this is an important issue. They need to do something about it, and they commit to reducing the carbon footprint of the city and counties. So our main activity in the Cool Cities campaign, in addition to having our teams work with their city and county leaders, has been writing a report or surveying the cities, trying to get a snapshot of what is occurring in each city as far as climate protection activities. This Cool Cities Local Government Climate Action Survey is about to be released officially next Wednesday. We're going to have a press release and a major rollout. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about what we found in very general terms and just give you a preview of what's to come. So the objectives in this report were really to try to just get a sense of what is going on as far as climate protection activities in Santa Clara and San Mateo counties by the local governments, the city governments, and county governments. And we think there's a great opportunity here to facilitate the exchange of best practices. Because as we found, actually, there are some cities that are really ahead of the curve in some specific areas. And so we're hoping this report will facilitate the exchange of best practices between the leaders and the other cities and counties that might wish to take action but would like a model. And then finally, our third objective is to try to give our Cool Cities and Cool Counties teams a tool that they can use to try to shift their local government policies and actions. And again, we've already had several of our Cool Cities teams are anxiously awaiting to use this report in the coming weeks with their city councils to really push for strong action on climate change. So some of the milestones, we put out the online survey in March of 2008. 28 jurisdictions responded. That's 76% of the jurisdictions in Santa Clara and San Mateo counties. To try to get feedback and any updates from those cities and counties, we distributed a preview edition of our report. And as I said earlier, we're going to have a press release next Wednesday. Our report is finalized now. And already the teams hope to use this. We've had a lot of interest from some of the city leaders as well. So just to talk about some of the general conclusions of our study, what I think is quite clear is that there's been a rapidly growing level of engagement by local governments on the climate change challenge. And so back at the start of our campaign in November of 2006, those are the cities, 8 cities had signed the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. I already showed you this map on the right, but so less than 18 months later, in June of 2008, we have 23 MCPA signings, Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement signings, and 2 Cool Counties Declaration signings. So I think that just dramatically illustrates how there's this rapidly growing level of engagement by local governments. And I really think this local government action, not just here, although we've had quite a bit of success, but even nationwide is really perhaps one of the beacons of hope as far as addressing at the government level climate change and reductions of greenhouse gas emissions. So there's been a rapidly growing level of engagement. This is actually a chart that's in our report. And this chart violates the first rule of presentations, which is never put a complex table up on the screen. So I don't want you to focus on the details. I want you to look at the colors and where they're placed. And what the general conclusion here is that even though there have been lots of commitments, there's rapidly growing engagement, there's still a lot of action that needs to be taken. Specific actions to address global warming are still missing. And the other conclusion general conclusion I'd like you to take away is that notice that there are certain outliers here and here and here. So there's actually a rich diversity of cities that are really leading in specific areas. And so like I said earlier, our hope is to try to use this report as a way to facilitate interaction and exchange of best practices between cities and counties that are on the cutting edge and others that would like to implement their commitments. So some of the conclusions are local governments show rapidly growing engagement on climate protection. As I said earlier, there are essential milestones that have not yet been achieved, and we really need to push to really make the Silicon Valley region on the cutting edge of addressing global warming. I think especially in the local government arena, although there's growing engagement, we really are still not on the cutting edge. I would say cities like Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington have been on the cutting edge of government action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I think one ray of hope is that there is a rich variety, as I said, of cities and counties that are leading in specific narrow areas, and there's potential there for rapid diffusion of best practices. And I think one of the things we found is that a combination of public engagement with regional initiatives or even extra city and extra county initiatives that provide resources, such as financial resources or technical resources, are really needed to push and move action forward in these cities and counties. In fact, the Air Resources Board, the California Air Resources Board, is now in the process of finalizing its plan for addressing global warming statewide. And our chapter submitted comments indicating that we really think there's a tremendous opportunity for early action on global warming emission reduction by having the state foster the innovation at the local level and support local governments as they try to take a leading edge position on addressing global warming. So our third initiative, which we call our Climate Action Team program, is just beginning. We started with our development phase training series back in the spring, and it's really designed to expand the scope of our program to address emissions associated with institutions and individuals. And it really relies on a combination of training of individuals on specific actions they can take, a social support, creating a social support network that will allow them to help each other through problems, make it more enjoyable to participate, and to help extend some of these ideas beyond themselves to institutions around the Silicon Valley region. So the goals basically are to broadly extend climate-friendly actions among individuals and organizations, like I said earlier, to try to take the training that these individuals get and their commitment and passion and try to funnel that into moving institutions forward as far as developing climate action plans to reduce the carbon footprint of institutions. And I think an essential ingredient in all of this is building a social support network. So one of the key goals in the Climate Action Team program is to really build a supportive network. And of course, the holy grail of any of this is to try to create exponential growth, to try to broadly diffuse climate-friendly practices out into the community. And obviously, that's a tough one, but we're hoping that we might make some progress there. So the first step in our Climate Action Team program is to have a series of training sessions and social support sessions. So during the development phase, for example, we had three training sessions, and we had 3 social support sessions, and we're continuing to have ongoing social support sessions to just help people along and to make sure that they implement their commitments. But the first step in the training series is really to have individuals calculate their carbon footprint and to set a reduction goal. So for example, I'm going to focus on one tool that one might use to calculate your carbon dioxide footprint, but there are many carbon dioxide calculators. This one happens to be one that the Sierra Club's, our chapter, actually helped create a few years ago. Most of these calculators really only deal with direct emissions, in other words, emissions associated, say, with energy that you use. They don't include that whole other category of indirect emissions associated with, say, products you buy, the transportation associated with those, and I'll say a little bit more about that later. Although some of the calculators try to estimate that, that's actually a bit tough to estimate. So this is the web address for the Kulik calculator. And so we're asking each participant in the Climate Action Team program to reduce their carbon footprint by at least 10%. Once they've calculated their carbon footprint, just 10% of that. So trying to get down to some specific numbers, this chart attempts to show typical carbon dioxide footprint for an American household. So that's what we have up here. And so what we have here in the purple and pink are the direct emissions associated with a typical household in the United States. So this includes things like, obviously, heating, lighting and appliances, hot water heating. You can see that the biggest component of the direct carbon footprint in terms of household operations is the heating associated with your home, and air conditioning and refrigeration here are others in that category. Down here, roughly a little less than half of the carbon footprint for the average household is associated with automobiles, transportation, gasoline use. And then you can see this whole other category of indirect emissions associated with the products that we purchase and a variety of services that we make use of. So roughly, I think speaking, our direct emissions account for about half of our total emissions, the other half being all those direct emissions associated with things we buy and services we purchase. Just for comparison, the average for the countries outside the US, the worldwide average is down here at 9.5 tons. And then down here, I have numbers from our first Climate Action Team program training participants. We had 10 participants. We wanted to keep it small in this development phase as we tried to refine our program. And the carbon footprint ranged from about 4 tons to up to 9 tons per person of our participants. And that just included the direct emissions. But what I want to actually, one of the ahas that our participants had was that many of them, even though they're trying to conserve energy at home and do the right thing, they really found that airline travel was their big footprint. The emissions associated with their trips around the world were really having a huge impact on their carbon footprint. Okay, so once we've had our participants evaluate their carbon footprint, we then present a series of opportunities or a series of options, a menu of options that actions people can take to reduce their carbon footprint. So what we've tried to do is put together a menu that ranks actions based on the carbon impact, based on the amount of savings that they may have as a result of taking that action, and the simplicity level of that particular action. So all of these numbers for the CO2 and the cost are based on national averages. And what you can see is that a series of actions one might take can actually have a big impact. So just highlighting here, if you were to switch from washing your clothes in hot water to cold water, and actually using the sensor, the humidity sensor in your dryer, you could have an impact of about 1,533 pounds of CO2. And it would reduce your footprint by 1,533 pounds of CO2. Another example might be what we call smart driving, namely reduce your average speed on the freeway from 65 miles per hour to 55. You could have an impact of about 720 pounds on your carbon dioxide footprint. I've seen this dramatically. Being a scientist, of course, every time I fill up, I have to write down how many miles, what the odometer reading is, and how much gas I bought. And when I do that calculation, I can really see the improvement in the mileage I get with my car as I try to reduce my maximum speed on the freeways. And then finally, this just re-emphasizes the importance of the footprint associated with airline travel. You can see a huge impact on your carbon footprint by, say, substituting a bus trip on a 500-mile journey or 450-mile journey rather than taking airline along that short hop, for that short hop. So what we do in the training series is we have the individuals calculate their carbon footprint and then develop a personal climate action plan to reduce their footprint using that menu of options I showed you earlier. So I just want to walk you through here. So we have Joe Average here. He calculates his carbon footprint of 20,000 pounds per year. He commits to reducing his footprint by 10%. He then goes and does the calculation, of course, wants to reduce his footprint by 2,000 pounds, and then he develops a plan to achieve that 2,000-pound reduction. In this particular case, the reduction is achieved by adopting smart driving, in other words, lowering his speed from 65 miles per hour to 55. He seals his home more effectively to reduce heat loss from windows and the this is not working on your insulation. This is actually just say improving your insulation in your window. Sorry, improving the seals in your windows and your doors. He decides to skip some beef on once a week. Has a bit of an impact. He decides to plant a tree and comes up with a total reduction of 2,008 pounds and a savings of $226, again, based on national averages. So our goal is to have people develop a personal climate action plan and then work with others that are participating in the program to form a climate action team to support each other, as well as then, once they've developed a personal climate action plan, eventually extend these ideas to an institution and hopefully get the institution to develop a climate action plan. So the next stage, as I said, is actually trying to approach an institution. We emphasize that these institutions that people go to should be really one where they have a personal connection. That obviously gives them a bit of an in. And so we try to take the knowledge that these people have acquired in the training series, the confidence that they've developed through the social support sessions, and then try to extend that into an institution and have the institution develop a climate action plan. I should say an ICAP here, an institutional climate action plan, is a plan for approaching the institution, not the climate action plan that we're hoping the institution will develop. So just to talk a little bit about impacts associated with our training series, our development training series. We had 10 participants. The estimated CO2 reduction for all those participants was about 59,000 pounds. The estimated cost savings, as they all developed their personal climate action plans, was about $2,300. And now we have our teams, our climate action teams, approaching a variety of institutions, the Catholic Charities, eBay, and the Half Moon Bay School District. And so we're trying to take this experience from our development phase training series and try to develop a refined program for the fall. So we're continuing to have ongoing social support sessions for our initial training development series. We're hoping to incorporate improvements from the development phase into our second round of training. To our official rollout in the fall of 2008. And I think one of the striking findings we determined from our training series, our development phase, is that we really need to move this onto the web and create a set of web-based tools that allow people to integrate, instead of having separate Excel spreadsheets, calculate their footprints, integrate that with the menu of options that they can incorporate in a personal climate action plan, have this all online so they can not only see their personal impact, but they can aggregate it, say, with their team members, other participants in the climate action team program, and maybe other people that they engage in this activity in the institutions. So I think there's a lot of, I think that's really going to be the cutting edge. Develop web-based tools, not just for all of this accounting on carbon footprints, but also perhaps use some social networking tools that social networking websites have developed to try to maybe enhance the social support experience. And then as far as our fourth initiative, this, as I said, is one of our longest standing initiatives, and really I think demonstrates the power of individual action, volunteers becoming engaged, taking their passion and actually taking a small step and having a big impact. So a couple of our volunteers back in 2005 decided on the simple proposition that they wanted to compare the permit fees charged by cities to install a solar electric system on a home. So they went and surveyed all of the cities in our chapter's area. They then wrote a report and compared those solar permit fees. And what they found was that there was a very large disparity in the permit fees charged by cities. Several cities were charging many thousands of dollars or a couple $1,000s. Some were just charging a few $100s or even less to get a permit to install a solar photovoltaic system. So it turned out that Paul Rogers at the Mercury News and a variety of other reporters gave this study a lot of press attention. And as a result of that, there was a dramatic decrease as cities became embarrassed by having such high fees that were actually not an insignificant percentage of the total cost of installing a solar system. And so 27 cities in the chapter's area have reduced their fees significantly. And in the Greater Bay Area, 72 cities have now reduced, actually, I think the number is even higher now, but at least over 72 cities have now reduced their fees in the Greater Bay Area. And in fact, we see that in our Cool Cities Local Climate Action Survey, Local Government Climate Action Survey. So what I like to do is just provide you with a few conclusions, and I think I'm doing okay on time. So I think what I'd like to convey to you is that an essential component of addressing climate change really is local action, and I personally think that's one of the stellar areas in which we've excelled, not just our chapter, but there's just tremendous opportunities for action, and there has been a lot of leadership both in institutions, local governments, and through individuals to really address global warming emissions. What we've seen in our study of local government action is that there really is a rapidly growing engagement in the Silicon Valley region, but we really still need a lot of key milestones to be achieved to really implement those commitments as this rapidly growing engagement is converted into actual action. It's not rocket science what you need to do to reduce your individual or institutional carbon footprint. And I think what we really need to do through programs such as the Climate Action Team program is to really take these well-understood ideas, reframe them in a way that is easy for people to integrate into their lives, and then broadly disseminate this information. And so we're trying to do that with our Climate Action Team program. And I just want to say that, of course, our chapter solar permit fee study, I think, is an example of the impact individuals, volunteers with a passion who really want to have an impact can have a significant influence on it may be a small step. In fact, in many cases, it was a significant step because many of the permit fees were so large, or a relatively large fraction of the installation fee for a solar system. So you can have an impact as an individual. And then finally, I think our Cool Cities Local Government Climate Action Survey has the potential to have a similar impact as the solar permit fee study did on a broader array of climate protection actions being adopted or that should be adopted by local government in our area. So a couple action items for you. You might want to consider signing our Cool Cities letter to the mayor. And so I have a clipboard with a petition or a letter over there. And we take all of those names, we sort them by city, and can present them to the mayor to indicate there's support for action at the local government level. Become part of one of our Cool Cities or Cool Counties teams. Or become engaged in some other way. Table, if you'd like. Interact with the public. Share your passion about addressing global warming, addressing the climate challenge. Calculate your carbon footprint. That's quite easy to do with the Cool-It calculator, or the state of California now has a carbon calculator you could use, and there are a variety of them out there. Set a reduction goal. Just at least set a reduction goal, and at least that'll start you on your journey, perhaps, to reducing your carbon footprint. You can learn to reduce your carbon footprint in a variety of forums, but one way you might consider doing that is by joining our Climate Action Team program, and maybe even starting a Climate Action Team at your institution. Help us broadly disseminate some of these basic emission reduction ideas. And of course, there's a rich diversity of possibilities there. And whatever your interest, your skill, however much time you have, I think we really need to step up to the climate challenge, or as I like to say it, the climate challenge and the clean and efficient energy challenge, which is really humanity's grand challenge at this moment in time. And I urge you to think about how important this is in your life and in the future lives of your children and the people you love, and just take a step. Even if it's a small step, it's important to take that step. So I generally like to end with this quote because I think it epitomizes what we need to do. And so this is a quote from Margaret Mead, which is, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." And I've really seen that, I think, through my association with the Loma Prieta chapter's Climate Action Campaign. There really is a thirst for action on global warming. And I think by people stepping up, we have a chance of addressing this really fundamental challenge. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giulio, for the very informative talk. I think we have a few minutes left if there's any Q&A questions, and I invite also people who are interested to talk to the Loma Prieta chapter members over lunch. Thank you.
I saw some data about trees in your talk. You said that 50 pounds of carbon dioxide can be removed by planting a tree. Wouldn't it be more efficient to plant a lot of trees and reduce carbon dioxide?
It's definitely one way to reduce carbon dioxide. There have actually been some studies at Stanford, which, of course, if at our latitudes, if you plant a tree, yes, you are absorbing more carbon dioxide. But if you're really talking about a forest-scale plantation, generally the ground is brighter than a tree is. So you actually, by planting, say, a large forest, a new forest, you would be changing the reflectivity of the ground. And in fact, you end up absorbing more sunlight. So there are people who worry about the budget. And in fact, the people who do these studies, for example, at Stanford, they've said, OK, if you do this in the tropics, say the Amazon rainforest, you can have a net impact, a really net positive impact. But if you do it at our latitudes, planting an individual tree is great because you're really not affecting the reflectivity much. But if you want to plant large-scale forests, there's a little bit more issue of whether there would be a net benefit when you look at the solar absorption and the CO2 absorption.
And then you said that most of the individual's footprint is generated by air travel. Can you elaborate on that? So
well, so in the case of our participants, because our climate action team development training series really was engaged Sierra Club volunteers who were passionate and can care about this issue, they had already done quite a bit in their lives to reduce their footprint. And clearly they were able to even do more through the suggestions in our climate protection actions menu. But they've done what they could at home, but then their airplane travel, a few of the members were really just shocked by how big a component that was of their footprint. And of course, there are ways to offset that. In the case of short trips, you might consider taking a train. Perhaps it's more relaxing. And of course, Governor Schwarzenegger, I think it was yesterday, signed on to the high-speed rail system, which would in fact reduce the carbon footprint of travel between here and LA. So there are, especially in the future, there will probably be some very good options for going between 500 miles, say, instead of taking a plane flight. Obviously, if you're taking a trip across the country, there aren't too many options right now, alternative options, especially given that we all lead busy lives. But of course, one opportunity perhaps would be to offset those emissions through what are called carbon offsets, say subsidizing the development of wind power, subsidizing the development of solar power, subsidizing a solar power system in your community. There are new types of offsets now that are being created which really focus on taking the money from an offset and applying it in your community so you can see what your money has done.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Well, thank you all for actually participating. I appreciate it. I know this is a week when lots of people take time off because of the vacations ending, and it's really nice to see a turnout here, and appreciate your interest, and hopefully you'll follow your passion. If you have a passion, you really want to step up to humanity's grand challenge, you will do something. Even if it has nothing to do with our chapter, it'd be great if you participate in our effort. We have a dedicated and passionate group of people already working, and we could always use more people because this is the magnitude of the challenge requires decisive action by everybody now. So I guess that's it.
Thank you very much, Julia, again.